Hi everybody, welcome back. In today's episode on the Stug, we are going to put the track on, or the tracks. So I've got the tracks on one side and finished and weathered up and all that. So I have these tracks here, which I've primed with Mr. Surfacer Black 1500, mixed about maybe 50-50 with their mahogany color, which I think is a 1000 grade, and then thinned with their leveling thinner. So that's how I prime this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put pigments on this. And then the other thing we're going to do today, and then put that on, and I'll sort of show you how to put the pins in for these Master Club resin tracks that I've used here. And the other thing we're going to do is work on the jack and weathering that up as if it's been used in the field, so it's got some mud and maybe some oil stains and whatnot on it. That'll be the focus of today's episode. So since last we met, I did work on the side. I did put the tracks on. So these are workable, as you can see. They do move. But I did have to fix them to the sprocket, the drive sprocket here, so that they would sit properly, because what was happening is they weren't kind of sticking to the sprocket, so I just had to put some very thin super glue in there to get them to sit properly. But the as you can see here, the sag, they give a pretty realistic sag. So again, I guess if you're asking me for the final verdict on resin tracks, they're very nice. They're a little bit futzy to put together compared to their metal counterparts, but the detail is quite nice. And at least from Master Club standpoint anyways, I can't speak to other manufacturers, but they give you lots of spares in the box in case you break anything or the pins flick off into perpetuity. And you may see an example of that today as we go through, because once we get this onto the vehicle, we are going to put the pins in on either side, and I'll show you how that process goes. So so we'll get up close and we'll go with the same mix of pigments that we had, and I'll sort of review that when Robert gets in close to the camera, and we'll start dusting this up and fixing it and weathering it and splattering it and all that good stuff. So we'll get right to it. Okay, so we're going to start applying our pigments onto the track, the primed track that you see here. And again, it's the same color of pigments that we used last time, so it's going to be equal parts of Airfield Dust, which is MiG 3011, Light Dust, which is MiG 3002, and Europe Earth, which is MiG 3004. So again, mixed in our trusty little plastic shot glass. And what I simply do is I take an old, as you can see, this is a very old ratty splayed brush, and I pick up, and you don't have to be too discerning here, and I just kind of work it in. Pick some more up, work it in. If you get too much into one area, you can just kind of brush it off. And try and make sure you're working it in, especially with the Panzer IV tracks. You've got these. There's lots of opportunities with these recessed areas here to pick up dirt and mud, which is what this would do. So I'm just doing the outer side of the track, and then we'll do the same thing on the inner side. And I always like to put when I'm doing this, because of the fact that the pigment tends to go everywhere. As you can see here, I've got a bit of a paper towel down. So I'll use that just so that I don't get stuff all over the table or workbench or cutting mat or whatever I'm working on. And you're just kind of working it in, picking some up with the brush and just kind of stomping it. like so, almost done. And again, I think I used 95 links per side here, and with the 95, that was able to get me that sag that you saw on the finished side. There we go. That looks good. And then with our old trusty X20 thinner, X28 thinner, sorry. What we'll do is we'll just start, and all you have to do is just kind of run it along. Let capillary action do its work, and the fixer, the thinner, will get sucked into the dry pigment. So you can see how quick this is. Again, the nice thing about this applicator is that it just gives you the amount you need. And I'm not even, I'm just kind of, I'm not even really applying pressure. Like, I'm not squeezing the bottle. The liquid's just coming out on its own, almost. And if you don't want to, if you don't have one of these applicators, you can always use an eyedropper. And again, the nice thing about, the way this kind of, the amount of fixer that this drops, or the amount of liquid that this drops out, is that it just gives you enough, so that it doesn't get soaking wet. So the dry time's a little bit easier, but of course that can always be accelerated with a hairdryer, which is what we're going to do off camera shortly. So I have to say, yeah, these Masterco tracks are really nicely detailed. There's a little bit of flash in some areas, but overall, yeah, pretty happy with the product. I mean, again, they're a little bit tedious to put together with the pins and all that. They require a large amount of patience, but okay. So we've got the pigment applied, we've got the fixer on. We're going to let it do its thing. We may help it along with a hairdryer just for the sake of expediency for filming. So I'll do that off camera, and once I'll show you what it looks like when it's all dried up. Okay, so I've taken the hairdryer to this, and as you can see, we've got the deposits where we put the pigment in have been fixed, and you can also see it looks like there's a bit of a reduction. So whenever you fix pigment, it's always going to look like there was less on than what you put on initially, which is fine. So what I'm going to do now is, just to get some of that dusty appearance back, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up some pigment that kind of dropped as we were applying it on in the previous step, and just kind of brush like so. And this I won't fix. I won't bother applying fixer, because this is just to get some dusty appearance. And like, unless you go in there and try and, even then you won't be able to scrub it all off. And the raised part of the tracks, well, we're going to hit that with some metal pigments to simulate wear and tear. So just to kind of, and again, it's to knock back that dark brown color that we primed it with. That black and mahogany there from Mr. Surfacer. So I'm kind of just repurposing some of the pigment that's fallen off or that's gotten onto the paper. And another good reason for picking up a paper towel, because it does a pretty good job of holding on to this stuff. Maybe pick up a little bit more here. Just like easy peasy. So the trick to doing tracks, I think, now it depends on the look you're looking for, but generally speaking, is to paint them in a kind of a dark brown, dark rusty brown color. Apply some pigments to them, and the degree of pigments that you use really kind of depends on, the look you're trying to achieve, and whether you're trying to map that to a specific theater of operation or terrain type or whatnot. How muddy do you want it or not want it, or is it dusty, or is it an arid climate, or is it a fairly wet, muddy climate? So you apply your pigments in that fashion. If it's really muddy, you may want to apply some additional product, like some textured acrylic product or whatnot, similar to what I applied on the vehicle before. Oh, which, by the way, was this stuff here. So this is what I used to create the kind of the wet mud, the textured wet mud that I put initially on the vehicle before putting the pigments and powders over. So you can use a product like this. I thinned it down a little bit. This is a Vallejo product. I bought this. Where did I buy this? I bought this in 2011, so 7 years ago, and it's still good. I still have lots left. Right. You can, and this is water, you can kind of thin it and clean it with water. It's, like I said, it's an acrylic product. So you can potentially use something like this to get into the tracks to create more of a mud, if that's the look you're going for. But the only problem with using that type of a product is you got to be pretty careful, because once it hardens and dries, if you're looking to manipulate the tracks afterwards, that may be a bit of a tricky proposition. So. There we go. So now you've got a nice dusty, kind of muddy caked appearance in there. And then now let's flip this over and do the other side. So it's the same process, right? So I'm just going to pick. Now you're going to have a little bit less mud, or you're going to use a little bit less pigment to simulate less mud on this side. And the reason for that is because you've got all the road wheels and the drive sprocket and the either wheel and the return rollers that are constantly, rubbing against or having contact with the inner surface of the tracks. So you're not going to go as crazy, because in reality, as the vehicle moved, a lot of this would get taken off by the action of the road wheels and the idler and the drive sprocket and the return rollers, whatnot, making contact with it. Plus, it's a flat surface, so there's not many nooks and crannies for the pigment to get into and stick to, right? So this is a much easier, a much lighter application. And the same would hold true for, even if you're, like I was mentioning earlier, if you're going very muddy, and you have a lot of texture and whatnot built up on the outer surface of the tracks to simulate a more muddy, more intense environment. The same is going to hold true on the inner side. Like, you're not going to have as much on the inside, because that's where the action of the road wheels making contact and whatnot are going to rub everything off, right? And we'll talk about how we account for that in a moment. Or in a subsequent step that we'll get to shortly. There we go. So this stuff, again, I will fix this. And this is easy. You just kind of And then you let capillary actually just pull it to the outer. That's how easy that is. If there's areas that you miss, you go back, fix them, maybe the outside. Very easy. Again, getting something like this for dealing with pigments and fixing them is ideal. So whether you're putting, you know, proper fixer in here, or you're using the X20A, or you're using the decal fix that Dave was using on his King Tiger, which is great for, again, for if you're looking at doing more severe applications. Remember I was talking about flash? Well, here's some, if you look in here, here's some flash from some of the resin. So we'll take this opportunity just to take the tweezers and pull that out. Again, it comes out pretty easy. And again, you would probably, I mean, you could leave it on there and you know, you probably hardly notice it was there, but there, done, clean. So the only it's the only drawback with these. I mean, not to say that you won't get some flash on metal tracks, but so we'll take a hairdryer to this, and then we'll go back and dust it over just like we did on the outer surface of the tracks. Okay, so the fix from the pigment's dried. Now we're going to do the same thing we did on the outer surface. We're just going to get some just kind of dust. Just like that. Just easy, easy, easy. Just boop, 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 boop. Done. Okay, so the next step, so we're going to use our trusty rubber paintbrush, and we're going to get some dark colored pigment. So I've got this this black, carbon black, smoke black pigment that we're going to use, and I'm just going to pick a little bit up, and I'm going to get most of it off. And again, what we're going to do is down the middle of the underside of the track where the road wheels would make contact, is I'm just going to again, another good use for pick up some more pigment here. Any dark color will do, just to show that, you know, there's some wear and tear. On the inside of the track here where the road wheels would make contact, right? And you're probably, as much as you're putting a little bit of dark color on, you're pulling off what we the sort of the earth color that you put on before. There you go. Let's flip this over and do the other side. Same thing. Again, this rubber brush for applying pigments is ideal. Now you could use, I guess you could use a thin Q-tip or one of those Tamiya cotton swabs, those shaped cotton swabs that they have. But I think this is one of the best tools I picked up in the last little bit. Done. Okay, so now the inside of the track is done. Now I'll just close this up so if I knock it over, we don't have black pigment all over the place. Now getting back to the outside. So now you can see that's nice, kind of dry, dusty, with a little bit of mud buildup on the inner recesses of the track. Now we're just going to add some variety by doing some speckling, and you can use any dark color. So I'm just using this dark mud from AK that I have, and I'm going to pick some up with. Actually, what I might do is just sort of dip this in thinner, pick some of this up. Let's try it. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's good. And again, just very imprecisely, just flick onto your track. Let's pick up some more. And all this is doing is just creating some variety of color. You could do different colors. You know, if I really wanted to get pretty, another option would be before I put any of the pigment on, and you know, some people do this if they want to have a more of a developed base for the track, is over the dark brown primer is to speckle different rust colors. You could do that too, but you'd lose a lot of that. I'll pick up some more. So getting a nice kind of long brush like this is ideal. This is a cheap brush I got from, I don't know where I got it from, dollar store maybe here at the hobby store. But don't use your fine brush for this, or your quality brushes. So just again, just picking up, just to give it a little bit of variety. One more pass up of the head here. I think we'll say she's done. There we go. And again, you got to think about how, you know, what the rest of the vehicle is like. So if we look at the main vehicle, it's fairly dry and dusty. You know, we have maybe some wetter areas at the bottom of the tank, but you know, the track would be, for the most part, would be dry. So there. So I think what we're going to do is dry this off and hit this. Clean that brush off as best I can. I think we'll hit this with a hairdryer, and then we'll go at it with the metal color pigments. Okay, so now so we've got the splatters dried up, which is good. So we've got that nice dusty, dirty, muddy looking feel to the tracks that we were looking for. So this is good. Now we got to deal with the raised part of the tracks. So again, it kind of depends on the look you're going for. But I like to use, sorry, I should show you what I'm using. So I like to use this polished metal from MIG. So this is MIG 3021, and it's kind of a bright silver, well, not bright, but there we go. So what I like to do is take a little bit of that, put it on, use the old Mark I finger here. And your finger is probably one of the, well, your finger has many uses, but but for applying pigment, it's a pretty good tool. So what I do is I just pick some up and I just rub along the top. And you can see here that you can start to get, you almost like dry brushing with pigment with your finger. Let me go pick up some more. There we go, now we're talking. So that's one way. So you can do that And you can start to see that there's a metallic sheen to the kind of the raised surfaces of the track where it would make contact with the ground. And another option is you can get a big graphite pencil. This is something I found in our local art store here. But any pencil will do. And you can do the same type of thing where you're just going over the tracks. Same type of thing. This might be a bit of a preferred option because you don't have to get your finger. That's all I have to do. So you can use either one. Either one will work just as well. You can also use the gunmetal color, which is MiG 3009, which I've used in the past. I just find that either the polished metal or the graphite pencil just shows up just a tad better, and you get more of a contrast. And we're done. So that's how you weather a track. And the reason why this is so handy is such a big surface to work with. And this will last you forever. Your great-grandkids will be using this if they're into the hobby. You'll be able to hand this down for generations. Done. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to wash up and get this pigment off my finger, and then we're going to look at getting this track onto the vehicle, which we'll show you in a few minutes. Okay, so now the tricky part, which is getting these tracks onto the vehicle. So what I do is I kind of thread these through. Now it's important to make sure you get the orientation right. So the front here, and the way I always remember it is that the Panzer III and Panzer IV tracks always make an A when they come down. So we want them to make, so this, you feed them in accordingly on the back here, and then kind of maybe with the help of some tweezers. Now, this is going through pretty easy. So that's why I didn't bother gluing in the idler wheel, or, well, this has the poly cap, so this can come in and out, which is nice. I wish they would have done poly caps for all of them, but okay. So the road wheels are glued in, and the return rollers are glued in. So it's just a matter of navigating. And then, like so. So what I want to do is I want to be able to pin it when it's down here, because that's probably one of the more convenient places to get at it. So what we can do is, now that I've got enough to get onto this, I can kind of help. Now, you want to be careful because it's resin and it's pretty fragile. Let's see if I can get this more. There we go. Perfect. That worked like I almost planned it. Okay. So just make sure, check the orientation of the track, because once you pin it, you're not going to be able to get it off without some, so that looks good. So now it's just a matter of getting this to sit. Now you guys are going to witness firsthand what I went through in building these. So these are the pins that you get with the Master Club tracks. And you can see, despite having done the full 2 lengths of track, there's still an awful lot of left over, which is great, because I don't know how many of these that I pinged off into the unknown depths of my workbench and cement floor and whatnot that I have at home. My workbench is in the laundry room, so it's kind of an unfinished floor. So there's 2 different types of pins. So there's the head of the pin, And then there's the part of the pin that has the smaller pin for fixing it, the cotter pin, I guess. So they're two different things. So getting one of these guys out. There you go. I should probably take a few out because I'm bound to lose some of these, but okay, let's see how lucky I get. So what I'm going to do is I think putting in... So again, the other reason for doing... I put 90, I think I said I put 95 tracks or 95 links on here. Let me just roll this over a bit. There we go. So I put 95, so I get a little bit more to play with, and I get more sag, and if you're going to put aftermarket tracks on there, like John Mahar told me, you may as well take advantage of the fact that you get a nice sag with them. So I'm just going to try and line these up and pin it. So what I might do is I might do the inside first. So flip the vehicle over. Again, be careful. If you notice, I haven't fixed the gun sight yet because I knew I was going to be manipulating the vehicle to get these tracks on. So what I do is I pick up. So again, I'm picking up the interior one, which is just the pin head without the cotter pin, like so. There we go. And then just line that up and just try and do this one like that. So that's in there. Let's see if that catches. It should catch. And then what I do is I just take the flat part of the tweezer and just press it in very gently, because if you press it too much, you could snap the pin, which I've done. So I'm talking from experience. So good. So that looks like it's in. So mission accomplished on the inside of the track. Now having that done on the inside should make it a little bit easier to do on the outside. So what I might do is just put the point of the tweezer in, just to make sure that the hole isn't blocked by something. Now these pins, for whatever reason, these pins are a little bit bigger. So these are the ones I had more problems with in the past. So again, just gentle pressure, just gradually get it in there. Like so. I think that's it. Let me just give it one more little push. Make sure I support it. Oops. There we go. I think that's good. Maybe just I'm going to tempt fate here and try to push it in just a little bit more. There we go. And you can kind of hear it. You can kind of hear it go in. So I think we're, yeah, done. Okay, good. So no on-camera disasters this time. That's fantastic. So, and then we'll just kind of tug this down into, make sure the teeth are grabbing it. So what I'm doing is I'm just sort of pulling the track down just to get that sag. Now what I have to do with the other side is I have to glue, I use thin super glue to kind of fix the track to the drive sprocket. And I'm sorry, I should show you what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to, just with the tweezers, just trying to manipulate. So maybe on this side it'll stay like that. But there. Done. So now we have those resin colored pins. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a dark brown. I'm going to use this Vallejo German camouflage black brown, which is like a dark, so similar color to what we picked, or what we did for the primer. And I'm just going to pick a little bit up on my brush, and I'm just going to paint. Let's say get this over, and I'm just going to paint that pin just so that it doesn't stick out. Done. And then we'll flip it over and do the inside. So we'll find the inside, which is right here. And just touch it up. Maybe touch that one up too. Rub the paint off on these guys, so just touch those up while we're at it. Done. I'll clean the brush off. Okay, close this up, and I think we are done. What I might do is just touch those guys with a little bit of pigment. But I think we are materially done. So there, your finished track on both sides, and just to kind of play with the... So you can see there's some good sag here too. So what I might end up doing on this one is I might fix it to the rear idler as well. So while it's in its workable state, you get it to a point where you're happy with it. There. So off camera, what I might do is I'll certainly look at fixing the gluing, and what I'll do is I will apply the, usually try and do it on the inside so that it doesn't show as much. I'll use the super thin CA glue, and then what I might do is I might hit it with some varnish after the fact, because it does kind of stay shiny when it dries, a little bit glossy. So I'll knock it back with this, and maybe just put just a little bit of dusting of pigments on it just to incorporate it, and then you're done. So the vehicle is materially finished. So now it's just a matter of working on some of the details. So, and one of the details that we talked about doing in this episode, which we are going to continue on, is the jack. And the jack is probably the single biggest tool that's on most vehicles. And what I usually do with my jacks is I'll paint them the same color as the vehicle, because I think when they were, a lot of these tools, when the vehicle was painted, were on, and the jack being a particularly heavy tool, either, I'm pretty sure because it was such a large presence, I don't think they would have it in natural metal or a different color, like a bright yellow, panzer yellow or something on a gray vehicle. So usually I just paint them the same color as the vehicle, and I might even, if they're in an area that would have been camoed, I might incorporate them into the camouflage. But I always like to give them a little bit of extra attention, because if there's any part, like, if the vehicle or using the jack on the to fix a blown track or a road wheel or something, it's going to get pretty muddy and pretty dirty. So what I'll do is I'll take, and very simply, so let's talk about what we want to do here. So I think the parts of the jack that would make contact with the ground would be this part here. Right, so this kind of base here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my trusty, so I'm using dark mud, and I'm just going to kind of just put a couple of blobs there. Maybe too much of a blob, but okay. And then I might also put a little bit of dusty earth. Now the dusty earth, and again, this is all you need, right? Just put that there like that, and then what I'll do is I might start working it in, so you get an old brush, you moisten it a little bit with thinner, like so. And then I'll just start, you get most of the thinner off. And then I'll just start working it in. Like that. Just to give it, that's all you need to do. Now what I do is I'll take kind of a short-haired stippling brush. So this is, you can use any old brush and just kind of cut it back just to the base. And then again, getting your same pigment mix that we used on the tracks and the rest of the vehicle. What I do is I just kind of, and again, it's the same. So the pigment does a couple of things. So it adds a little bit of texture. It gets fixed by the underlying oil colors. And it kind of dries things up a bit. So when it dries, and there you go, you have a nice muddied jack base. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to dry, let's maybe do the same thing on this part. So this is the part that would sort of connect to, or they would place up against part of the vehicle. So let's assume that that part of the vehicle was muddy too. So we'll do the same type of thing here. And then we'll get some of the dusty earth. So that was the dark mud, dusty earth. So again, these things are very, I thought they were pretty gimmicky at first, but once I started using them, they're pretty convenient. But again, you can use your traditional oil paints too. Not that these are any better, but like that. And then use your same moistened brush, do the same type of thing, stipple, stipple, stipple. All right, just kind of work that in. And maybe incorporate that up the vehicle, so we'll kind of do that over here as well. And again, just using a little bit extra that I picked up here because I put a fair bit of paint on there. Oil paint, that is. I'll come back and pay that attention. But and the same thing, right? You just pick up some pigment with your short stippling brush and get in there like so, and that's it. Blow the excess off and done. And so again, it shows that this has been used. Maybe knock that back a bit with some of the dry brush. So you can pull some of that off, work that in. That's all you have to do. Easy, easy, easy. Very simple. So what I'm going to do is work my way up the base and just put just a little bit of oil paint here and on the base. And we'll get some more of that lighter dusty earth color. Like so. Like that, maybe some in here. And then we'll look at blending that. Very simple. And then get some more of your pigment and just start working that in. So it's the same type of thing we did on the tread plate here. And then I'll just blow the rest off. And
nice dry brush just to kind of work in this other pigment here. And then maybe just do a little bit of random on the body of the jack. Again, using our same two colors. All right, just a little bit, maybe here, there, like that. Don't forget the other side. The inside, again, just like you would with the road wheels, just let's work on the inside. Maybe a little bit there. And then we'll get some of the lighter color. And the only reason why I'm using a paintbrush for the lighter color is because I've used the brush that's part of this so much that it's kind of flayed. So just to get a more precise application. Oops, I'll clean that off. We don't want to touch the supports like so. And we're just going to work it in. So again, your trusty brush, just kind of start stippling that just to get a kind of a muddy, dusty base. Oops, I should show you what I'm doing. Just, again, same type of thing. You're just kind of working it in, just stippling. Easy, easy, easy. Just like that. That looks pretty good. And then do the same thing on the other side of the vehicle. This will be a little bit harder to do. And don't forget the handle. Like that. Looks good. And then you take your pigment and just start, just rotate this up a bit, and just start working it in. The same thing on this side here. It's a bit too much. And if you think you've put too much on, you can always take, again, a dry brush, and you can just kind of pull some of it off. So that looks good and dirty. And let's do the same thing on the inside. Pull some off. Again, just... And if I wanted to go back and put more, I can repeat the process. Put the oils on, work them in, put more pigments on. Now what I'm going to do is, because I got a little bit more on that bracket than I wanted, I'm just going to go with some odorless thinner. Use that same small brush I was using before. And just kind of paint it off, just to get a little bit more of the gray to come back. Now you can have some dirt on there, because if there's dirt on the tool that the bracket is holding, chances are there's going to be a little bit of dirt on the bracket, but I maybe put a little bit too much. Pick up some more thinner. There we go. Okay. And the last thing I want to do is, again, maybe get a little bit of an oil stain in there. So I'm going to use just a dark wash to get onto this mechanism here, just to bring that out a bit. So I'm using any dark wash will do. The nearest one that I happened to grab that was handy was this NATO Camouflage Wash, which is MiG 1008, 1008. And I'll just pick up, oops. Yeah, it's a good dark oily color, it's nice. Yeah, it's good. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch, just like that, just let the, just to bring out that nice little detail that we have there. Like so. And we'll let that kind of dry. So that will dry a little bit lighter, I think. But I think that looks good. Maybe a little bit on the other side. Just right where the handle. Just to get some, there we go, looks good. Perfect. And if it spreads out a little bit more, that's good. That'll simulate a nice bit of a grease spill. Got to get a blown gasket on there somehow. Okay. So I think that's good. I think the only thing left for us to do on this is to go back to our metal pigments. So I'm going to use the gunmetal here. I'll start with that. And so again, another very handy application for this rubber brush here is maybe here where, so this part would be the part that would touch or make contact with the tank, is just on the edges, just to give it a bit of a, again, you're just kind of like, almost like you're dry brushing the edges. And if you wanted to, you could even go over it with a pencil. And then the same thing on the lower surface here. This bottom edge. Maybe in here. Just to give it some depth. I think it looks pretty good. Easy. Maybe again, you can probably maybe attack there as well. Just as if, you know, you would kind of scrape some of the down to the metal, just to give it some depth, maybe even a little bit up here. Pencil might be good for this because the pencil would naturally catch the edges. There you go, looks good. In this case, it might be better to use something a little bit smaller than this giant size pencil to do this work, but oh, Mo's onto something. So very easy. And I think you're done. Now you've got a nicely weathered jack that looks like it's got, you know, it's seen some service in the field, and just adds another interest item to your vehicle. So yeah, so I think that that concludes this episode. I think we're materially done. The only thing, a couple of things they need to do is obviously we have to put the cables on the back of the vehicle here. I think I'm going to use one of those metal antennas and put that into this antenna holder here.
and maybe do a little bit of chipping on the front of the vehicle. We also talked about, we might want to put some more pigments and weathering and buff in here, just where dust and dirt would collect. But at this point, you're kind of fine tuning it, so it's materially done, and I think there's maybe one more episode left to go over just kind of the finishing touches on it. So yeah, so thanks again for hanging out with me in this episode, and I'll look forward to catching up with you guys in the next one. Thanks very much.